If any of you have ever seen a speaker from the Fed before, you probably know what's coming next. There we go. The disclaimer. All right, the views in this presentation are my views and do not represent the views of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta or the Federal Reserve System. In addition, any examples in this presentation that mention economics or monetary policy, because remember at the Fed, we are not policy makers, they are used solely for the purpose of illustration. All right, just a little bit about me. I haven't been at the Fed for all that long. I've been there for just over a year now. I came to the Fed from academia. I was a professor for over 30 years. And my area of study, of expertise is actually material culture of the ancient Mediterranean world. So I've come a long way and at least leapfrogged a few fields to get here. The team that I work for and with at the Fed, I work in public affairs, and our team consists of editors and a writer. And all of the content at the Fed, our external website, is filtered through our team, every single word, right? But I am here today to talk about effective writing because I have over 30 years of experience researching, writing, editing, and teaching writing. So here are a few takeaways from today for you. Number one, know your audience. I'm underscoring exactly what John just addressed as well. I think you're going to be hearing that a lot today. But it correlates with knowing your brand. And I know 15 years ago, I would have never thought when I was teaching writing that I would be talking about branding. It is a different day and age for sure. Another takeaway is to encourage you to follow a logical structure in your writing. Now, when I last gave this presentation, someone did give me some feedback and they said, why did you focus so much on structure and logical order and arranging your paper? We all know how to do that. And I, smiled politely and I thought, well, I'm telling you, after over 30 years of teaching writing and reading papers, we do not all know how to logically order our papers. So again, it's also about keeping it forefront in your mind and not to kind of get lazy and slack off about things. Third takeaway is that your social media presence requires a writing strategy. All right, it takes as much prep work as pre-writing your papers do. And then the fourth takeaway is to enlist readers. All right. The elephants in the room. Two things. Writing is hard. It just is. It takes prep work. Then you have the writing or the outlining, the writing, the revisions, the editing. And it is a craft that takes practice and you are never done. When I said that we have a team of editors at the Fed and every single word that goes out on our external website comes to the editors, everything I edit also has another pair of eyes look at it, right? Every single time. Writing is hard and it takes work. And in this day and age, you might be tempted to ask, why should I put all this sweat and time and energy into writing when we have generative AI, right? But I'm here to tell you, you need to do your own writing. And I've got three main reasons for saying that. Now, we all know the problems with generative AI, okay? These are talked about in the media and probably in your classrooms on the daily. We know that there's bias in the sources. We know that some of the sources are outdated. We know that generative AI does not discriminate between deep fakes and misinformation and good vetted studies. We know there are hallucinations and we know that there are copyright issues. But I think that for you, there are three compelling reasons over and above those to avoid generative AI in your writing process. Number one is vulnerability. Vulnerability. And it's the vulnerability of your data, of your intellectual property, of your proprietary formulas and methodologies. What goes into the matrix does not come back out. And maybe you're not ready for your data and formulas to be out there yet. Right? So there is a certain vulnerability. And yes, some platforms now offer a locking system, but just be careful. Those can be hacked too. So be very cautious of what you put into the matrix. And when we talk about copyright issues, that copyright that could be violated through generative AI could be yours. So don't put yourself out there that way. Number two are the optics. No one likes lazy people, right? It doesn't look good in academics, right? It doesn't look good in any career field, I would argue. And in the long run, it doesn't serve you best. There is a new, I guess, quip that is going around these days related to generative AI. And I can tell you that if I was still in the classroom, this would definitely be my approach to a student submitted Gen AI paper. Why should I bother reading what you haven't bothered writing? Why should I invest my time and energy in something you haven't invested your time? And then the other thing tied to this and the optics is reputation. All right. My colleagues still in the classroom, they're using those Gen AI screening tools all the time. And again, oh, this person isn't doing their own work. They're not invested in the time. Maybe they're a little lazy. Doesn't look good. So protect your reputation. And then lastly, is the command and mastery you get of your material through the writing process is unparalleled by any other experience. And this command and mastery, this intimate familiarity with your own work will serve you well when you are engaged in public speaking, consulting, advising, and working with the media, right? So that's my little focus on the neck. You've already heard this from John. Write to your audience. Now, you're here because of your passion. You're here because, I'm going to go back one slide. You're here because of your passion, all right? Because of your interest in your research areas. I get it. Like, as a researcher myself, we all have to admit it. We have our favorite areas, right? We have our little, oh, I loved researching this. Yeah, this was kind of boring. So I get excited about this aspect of my research. I really get into it. This is what I want to write about. This is what I'm looking forward to. The hardest part of writing, though, is putting your own ego aside. It's not about what your favorite topic is or your favorite area of your research is. It's all about your reader. It's all about your reader. Okay, it is not about you. And I know it's hard to think about it this way, but if you really spend a moment in self-reflection, you will see how much is ego-driven in your writing and how much is actually considering your reader or your audience. So you need to think about who you are writing for. And this is part of the pre-writing prep. All right, pre-writing prep. And this is applicable to whether you're writing about or you're talking about and focused on a single paper that you're working on or your body of work writ large. Because overall, who you're writing for, your audience will determine the tone you take, the assumptions that you make, your choice of words, again, jargon, and the complexity of the sentences. Now, how do you begin this discernment process of who your audience is? John's talked about that. I'm talking about it. Okay, well, how in the world do we do this? I'm going to give you a few tips. All right, your why. Your audience is going to drive the content, but you need to start again with that bit of self-reflection. What is it that you have to share? What is your distinctive voice? What is your distinctive perspective? What are you bringing to the table? And then you need to think about your audience. Why would they be looking at your work? What is their so what? What do they want to get out of this? All right? What do they care about? And where you have that intersection of your why and their so what, that's where you're going to be able to find the sweet spot for your content. All right. Again, this is true for each individual piece of writing that you approach, but also for your meta-narrative. So let's take a look at that a little bit more closely. Your why. This is your meta-narrative, the story that brought you to your graduate studies, to your field. It goes from your passion, why do you do what you do, to your approach, what is the value added of your perspective or your voice, to your data and evidence, what is the value added of your particular research, what is distinctive about you and your work. But then, how does it help other people? From researchers to policymakers to the general public. And this why is your brand. This why is your brand. And this is more of the prep work that you have to do, that it helps you develop your brand and informs your macro level approach to your entire body of work. Right? And we will come back to this consistency of brand when we talk about social media. Now, generally, you can divide your audience into two primary groups. Number one are the experts. This is your reader who has read the same literature that you've read, understands the jargon, challenges you, asks those hard questions, and wants and expects serious answers, will force you to write well and logically, and will drop your paper as soon as they think you can't tell them anything they don't already know. They will walk away. Here we have the second group, the general reader. These are people who have not read the same literature as you. They do not understand the jargon and will in fact be alienated by the jargon. They will oftentimes blame themselves in this sense of alienation, causing them to abandon an article. And yes, as you think about your audience, there's a lot of empathy required in this imaginative, creative prep work that goes on here. Put yourself in their place. We've all read pieces of research that are out of our field of expertise. How did we feel when we were alienated? How did we respond to the work? Did we walk away? Or how much time were we willing to invest in trying to get up to speed with what was going on here? No matter how interesting the subject matter, no matter how tantalizing the title, how effective is your writing if you're on the outside, if you're a reader on the outside? Should this matter to you? We believe it should, right? Those of us who teach writing do think it should matter, and we would argue that there are ways of preventing it. So you can go through these steps, asking yourself, how many audiences do you have? And you may have well more than one audience. Do you need to anticipate different genres or products for the different audiences? Now, at the Fed, our economists produce research papers, and they put out discussion papers. But we also provide a product line that are summaries of these discussion papers. Much, much shorter. A 50-page discussion paper, a research paper can be distilled down to a 3-page summary that has fewer graphs, more different kinds, other different kinds of visualization, loses most of the jargon. All right, it's a different product for the same research. So do you need to anticipate different genres or products? Do you want to take your research paper, and another genre would be turning it, developing it into a blog? All right, an additional, doesn't have to be one or the other, but you could have an additional line that would be a blog. You can have an additional line that would again be a summary, something short. Have you developed a distinct profile for each product and audience? I actually keep lists. I keep lists to remind me as a writer and editor that when I am reading a discussion paper, these are the things that I need to keep forefront when I am thinking about that audience and that product. When I am working with the series that focuses on summaries of the research papers, I have a separate list. And don't be ashamed of that. I put Post-it notes up all the time. Key vocabulary words I like to use, things that I want to keep focused on in this particular piece of writing. What vocabulary words do I want to come back to? What keywords do I want to come back to? Because it encourages consistency in my style and writing. I keep up that list of what I want and what are the expectations of this particular product or genre that I'm working with. It keeps me as writer, editor focused. All right, so develop some tools that may help you in keeping focused on that as well. Are your products and voices consistent with your brand? This is really important. You know what you're good at. You know your expertise. Now, if you are creating a product and your reader is relying on you, right, in your expertise, don't be like, we all have hobbies, or in academics, we have secondary areas of expertise, tertiary areas of expertise. In my own area, my expertise was again, ancient West Asia. Okay, but I had a tertiary area in medieval Islam. Now, for my brand and with folks in my network, all of a sudden out of left field, I've got stuff coming out here on medieval Islam. Like, what's going on? So again, think about your brand, think about your voice and consistency within it, right? And if I was still in academia, and I might have a second brand, a second stream, okay? A different network and a different set of products and publications, keeping them separate. Are your products, and then set a benchmark. Set a benchmark and a time to not just work on development, but then also on reflection when you need to go back and you say, wow, okay, how much engagement am I getting from my writing here? What's the feedback I'm getting from my writing? Do I have too many publications? Am I putting things out enough? Am I putting things out in a timely manner? What is my engagement count? If you're counting clicks on social media, etc. Give yourself time to assess and reassess your brand, your overall approach, and make changes if you need to. Don't be afraid to do that. All right. Following a logical structure. Getting your meaning across. And what we're talking about here, particularly with papers right now, is to get your meaning across in an effective way means that you are arranging the parts of your paper in a logical, orderly fashion. There are many different ways to think about structure, many different analogies. Some refer to it as a roadmap, or think of it as a roadmap. Some like to think of it just simply in outline form. And some like to imagine that the structure of your paper is a skeleton. I have found this one particularly effective in the pre-writing phase. I think like an attorney in a courtroom. And I imagine that I'm a prosecutor. And I know that I have a matter of minutes, if not seconds, to grab the attention of the jury. So I need to get up there and I need to say, the defendant is guilty. The defendant is guilty because of reason 1, reason 2, and reason 3. And in the course of this trial, you will see evidence such as X, Y, and Z. The defendant is guilty, and at the end of this, you, the jury, will find that you have no other option yet except for conviction. Okay? So that's how I start off with my writing paper. I think of myself in that way. What is the most elemental and essential distilling of my work, right? You can elaborate later, but boil it down to its essence. That way of thinking translates into paper writing, the logical order of sentences, paragraphs, and the paper as a whole. With sentences, we are talking about the logical ordering of words that is clear, that is sound, and that is sensible. When we get to the paragraph structure, we are talking about the logical ordering of sentences. Now take a moment and read through this paragraph. Did you learn anything from what you just read? Okay, no. Why or why not? It's a string of facts, right? But it's not a narrative, okay? It's not cohesive. A well-written paragraph, a well-structured paragraph provides that cohesion. Now read this. Right? This is what we're talking about. This is why structure matters. What's going on in the background here? I've told you there are many ways to think about organizing your writing, and the pyramid is also one of my very favorite forms, analogies. The main message, all right, or your topic sentence of each paragraph provokes a question, as in, the fit of the model doesn't work for the data. Huh? Question, why? How? Right? And the rest of the paragraph is the answer to that question as we descend down the steps into the details. This structure allows your reader to proceed logically through your argument. Now, there is one paragraph that is going to be inverted. And this is your introductory paragraph, where you will move from the general topic into the specific, all right? And what your paper should eventually end up looking like is this, all right? And if the paragraph is a backbone, we need to think about then how and ways to flesh that out for the reader, all right? To make structure even more obvious. One of the ways to do that is through headings and takeaways. Headings and takeaways. Because some readers, and I know you will just like not believe me when I say this, they skip and skim. So what they want to do is get to your main points. They want to see your headings, and all this you're pulling from the outline, from that pre-work you've already done. Stick that in there, your keywords, your section headings, your takeaways. If the pyramid is the backbone, then the fleshing out or the structure or the section headings and the takeaways. It's making your structure even more obvious. Now, to this point, we focused on papers. I want to move now to social media. And it takes strategy of its own. All right, and requires prep work. when you're talking about your brand, identify your audience and identify the appropriate platform. We do an awful lot, in my personal experience too. So I have a book out there, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I have a separate, platform where I focused, or at the time when it came out, all the social media posts about that book. All right, and it wasn't appropriate for some things. It was appropriate for LinkedIn. It was appropriate for its Instagram. It was not appropriate for other platforms. So think about the platform and what you want to focus on for a particular piece of writing. And then think about your content. Identify your main message and key takeaways. Identify a graphic, an image, or a video. Identify other accounts you might want to link to, and identify hashtags that you want to use. Now, when we talk about crafting copy, because again, I'm not here as a mass comm specialist, I'm here to talk about effective writing, and I'm going to focus on crafting the copy. There are two main types of copy in social media. You have your headlines, and then you have your captions. And a headline could be used on a graphic or to introduce your caption. You pull it from your main message, and you keep it short to the point. In the caption, this is the place to elaborate. Now, captions can end up being several paragraphs long. That's again where you need to think of your audience. How long are they going to stay with you? And sometimes that depends on your writing, on your subject matter, and sometimes on the platform. There are a lot of websites solely devoted to tips for writing social media. I have distilled these down to what I think the essence is, the most important things for your social media copy. If you're just launching or have new followers, do an about me post. Let your followers know your why. Use active voice. The labor force struggles rather than the labor force has been struggling. Right? Humanize your data. Tell a story. Use a quote. Use numbers because people like John like numbers. Ask a question or issue a command. Ask readers to share a thought. And hey, tell me in the comments. I'm going to call to action to do something. Use vocabulary words that are timely or trending, and avoid hyperbole. This is an example that I pulled from a recent social media thread that we did at the Fed for a data tool. It's a data tool. Like, how exciting is that? But you'll see how we crafted it. Number one, if you're starting on the far left, we've got a chart, we've got a graph, okay? This is our GDP now. And a command, download the Economy Now app. When you go over to the right, we have a video. In it, we feature an economist who tells the story of the creation, how he got the idea for this tool. So it humanizes. You'll also see that we post questions. When is the GDP Now tool updated? Are you curious about the GDP tools? And we did all of this in a thread. So there are commands, there are questions, it's engaging. All right, I'm gonna speed up just a little bit. I want to get to this template. Here's your challenge, 25 words or less, and you do this for every single piece of writing you have, every post that you want to make. You identify your main message, and then I want you to write that main message as a command, frame it as a question, use a quote, and reference an image. What image would you use if you could? And then do the same for each of your takeaways for that piece of writing. Maybe you'll never use all of these, but it's the exercise itself, right, that helps you hone in your focus. Lastly, I want to encourage you to enlist readers. I know, I'm a Braves fan. I had to put Derek Jeter up there for the ball. All right. I couldn't help it. All right, you've done your prep work. You've done your brand analysis. You've outlined, you've written, you've gotten all the revisions. Don't drop the ball because you're not done yet. All right, you're not done yet. Ask for help. Why? Why should you ask for help? You've done all this other legwork. Take a moment and read this. Remarkable, right? You can read that because our brain is amazing and it automatically fixes things. we fix things in our brain on our own, we correct spellings, we supply missing words, and it is never more true than of our own writing. We're too close to it. So you need readers, whether subject matter experts, general readers who will hopefully be honest and say, what the heck are you talking about here? Or professionals, that is the editors, proofreaders, and copy editors. So work deals with your colleagues, trade your papers, trade your social media posts, get that feedback, beg friends. And sometimes it comes down to begging. When I was a newlywed and I was so excited, I was finishing up my dissertation. I had one last review. My husband, I won the lottery. I married an English teacher. And I gave it to him and I'm like, oh, you know, you can have the baby now. You can read it. Give me your feedback and I'll leave you alone. I left the room. You know, I'd go up at the door and hear what was going on, silence, come back. Like an hour and a half went by. I didn't even come out for water. I'm like, what's going on? So I tentatively opened the door. Dude is sound asleep on the couch with my dissertation on his chest. And he then wakes up and he says, Katie, I love you, but I can't. He said, I got up into a page and a half of your methodology and I've never been more bored in my life. I can't read through any more of this. You need to hire someone. So when I say beg, it may come down to begging, but do it in whatever way you can do. Ideally, you can have all three of these folks look over your work before you get it out there. All right, your expert reader, someone in your field, points out your errors in logic and points out your gaps, ask the hard questions. A general reader, as I said, is somebody who's going to say, what are you talking about here? I need help. And particularly if your sentences are too complex and you're using too much jargon. All right, this is what I have found is what's so helpful about your general reader. And then you've got the pros. And there are two types of editors, the one who will come along and do developmental editing and the other who does copy editing. I won't belabor all of this because I know this is being recorded and you can come back. So just a brief review. I've encouraged you to know your audience, identify your audience as, know your brand, and be confident. Oh, to that, always keep your professional social brand separate from your personal. Just separate, even if it means you have to close down one account or lose followers, you've got to do it. Structure is essential to good writing. Social media requires as much prep work as the writing does. It requires strategy and crafting, and do not go it alone. Right, get help. All right, thank you all so much for your time. I appreciate
it. We have a couple minutes for questions for Katie or for John, who I'll try to substitute for, though not very well.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Dr. Peters, for a great presentation. My name is Tony Price. I'm a researcher at the Health Policy Center, just right downstairs, and a doctorate of public health student in the School of Public Health. My question, after you have done your academic writing, research, and you have disseminated that information, can you offer some strategies to anticipate what types of questions you may receive from the people who receive your work?
Yes. Okay. And again, if we had a little bit longer, could have gone into that in some detail because it is an entire sub area in and of itself. But I would say at its essence is to deploy empathy. And that is you preview brainstorm. What kinds of questions might I get? And part of this is understanding also, and if you're talking about disseminating within your field of expertise, okay, then it's a different set of questions than you're going to get from the general public. All right, if some of your work has appeared in the Atlanta Journal, for example, different sets of questions. So put yourself in the position of that reader and say, what would I ask? What do I think is going to be perhaps a red flag? What might be a sensitive issue? What might be a thorny issue today? And in that sense, you think about those key words. What's trending? And I know we kind of hate to use that word, but what's trending? What's a hot topic? Are labor markets all the buzz right now? And then if your work has labor markets screaming in it, focus on that and say, gosh, labor market, or we've had this These have been some recent headlines. Why is the paper interested in my work? What does it mean for their reader? Well, then what do I think some questions might be? So it's working through a process. It's that same prep work. The other thing here is it's just like ask your readers, ask your friends, and the number of times that I've challenged myself and my students, I say, if you want to really you have questions like, I'm not sure what I just read, or what was the main message that came out of that? I said, pick up the phone, I'll call my mom and say, Mom, I need to tell you in 3 sentences what I just wrote about. And if I can't do that, and I make it hard, like I say 25 words or less, or 3 sentences. If I can't do that, then I know I'm not ready yet. I haven't gotten it yet. But those are some of the ways that I have been successful in anticipating questions.
Perfect. Thank you.
Does that help? I hope it does. Okay, all
Thank you.
right.
Thank you.
Christian, do you have any online questions?
Yeah, one person wanted to know if you're willing to share your slides.
So, Florence,
We are, if the Fed's okay with that, we love to share.
okay, I think I can. Let me see about getting permission from the Fed. I will say all the photographs in there were copyright free, most of them in my notes that you did not see on the screen. They were from Wikimedia Commons. Again, you've got to be careful with copyright. Also, some of that material was taken from a book by Chabry, and and where direct quotes were from there, that was at the bottom too. And then the very last slide I skipped over was an image of her work. And I do recommend that one. So I'd have to get permissions, but I'm willing to do it if I get to go ahead.
All right, well, John, one last question.
I should say, I often, thank you for this, I often tell my students, like, just write, like, stop thinking and just write,
Yes.
make some progress. But then I feel like if I take that advice, it lacks the structure that I totally agree with. Is there good advice for students? Do you think about the structure in advance, or do you just write, like, it's the right,
Okay,
sort of pathway?
I've tried it both ways, which is why I hesitate a little bit. And it really depends on your own style and what works for you. So number one, I would say try both approaches and see where you find the greatest success. Now, sometimes though, I would also say I'm really caught up. Like I am so excited and I have to write it while I am in fuego, right? And so I find that I do better with the structure from the outset, but if it's hitting me and it's flowing, I go and I don't impede that at all. Typically what I find is I have reams and reams. I do a little bit of online, I type it in, but then I also just free write in notebooks. And what I have found is that out of 3 to 4 pages of that free writing, a few morsels might crop up and actually make it into the final product. Usually it has more to do with concepts or key words rather than a paragraph. I might have written a great paragraph, which seemed wonderful at the time, but I come back a day later, I'm like, ooh, no, it needs more structure. Yeah. So free writing for me is that's better in the brainstorming process, not a paper that you haven't gone through and edited multiple times and revised is not a final product. That's still a draft.